They say the desert remembers every footstep, every whisper, every sin a man or woman leaves behind. And on certain nights, when the wind crawls through the canyons like a wounded animal, the old folks of Hollow Bend still murmur the name Evelyn Hale. That's how the storyteller begins, leaning close to the fire, the sparks dancing like little ghosts around his boots. Now listen well, he says, because this tale ain't no ordinary frontier yarn. It's about a widow who walked alone and a rancher who should have listened when she whispered, "Please don't." Hollow Bend sat in the middle of nowhere, a place so dry even the wind sounded thirsty. Its roads were nothing but dust and regret. Its buildings leaned like they were tired of standing. Beyond the saloon and general store stretched miles of sunburnt plains, patches of dead brush, and that old dry riverbed that hadn't seen water in 5 years. And somewhere on that forgotten land sat the Hale Ranch, small, quiet, stubbornly alive. Evelyn Hale lived there alone. A year earlier, she had been a different woman, smiling, soft-spoken, standing beside her husband Matthew while he worked the fences and tended the cattle. Folks said they were the last good thing in Hollow Bend. But when Matthew died, sudden, unexplained, alone out in the canyon, something inside her went silent. She wore her grief like armor. She walked through town with a careful stillness, chin up, eyes forward. And though she spoke with gentle courtesy, there was a heaviness behind her voice, the weight of someone who had seen too much and said too little. Trouble came riding one afternoon on a cloud of dust. 3 riders, 3 shadows, and every horse carried a Benedict. The Benedict ranchers, the meanest family in 3 counties. They took what they wanted, and what they couldn't take, they broke. Jed Benedict, the eldest, slid off his horse with a grin sharp enough to cut rope. "Evelyn," he drawled, "seems your late husband owed us money. A debt's a debt. We're here for your land." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the small parcel of supplies she had just bought from the store, but she kept her voice steady. Matthew owed nothing. Jed stepped closer. Dust swirled around his boots. He smelled of tobacco and cruelty. "Lady, sign the deed. Don't make this hard." Her eyes lowered. Her voice trembled. "Please don't." Jed chuckled, a cold, careless sound, and flicked his eyes toward his men. "Rip her boundary fence. Let her understand what happens when someone tells me no." The riders turned. Evelyn stood helpless as hooves thundered past her and splintered wood cracked in the distance. The townsfolk watched from windows and doorways, but nobody stepped out. And as Jed swung back onto his horse, he tipped his hat with a smirk. "Next time, we take more than fences." The storyteller pauses at the fire, eyes reflecting the flames. "Now folks thought she was just a grieving widow," he says softly. "But grief can hide many things. Strength, secrets, and sometimes a past sharp enough to cut back." The storyteller leans closer to the fire, letting the flames paint deep lines across his weathered face. His voice grows lower, like the desert itself is listening. "Thing about the frontier," he says, "is it never forgets cruelty. It remembers every drop of spilled blood, and it keeps count." After Jed Benedict tore down her fence, Evelyn Hale did not shout, did not curse, did not chase after them. She simply stood there with her arms pressed to her sides and her eyes fixed on the distant hills where her boundary line once stood. But the town noticed something else that day. Not the tears, she didn't cry. Not the fear, she didn't shake. No, it was the stillness. Like the world around her had shifted, and she was listening to something only she could hear. The Benedicts kept coming. 1 week later, they poisoned her water trough. The next, they rustled 2 of her horses. The week after, they blocked her supply route, forcing her to make the long journey through Dead Man's Pass. And Hollow Bend did nothing. People whispered behind shuttered windows. "She's just a widow. She can't fight them. She should have sold." Sheriff Darden, too old for justice anymore, found her repairing the windmill ropes alone under a blazing afternoon sun. "Evelyn," he said gently, "you should leave. Go east. You're a good woman, but you can't stand against the Benedicts." Evelyn tied the last knot without looking up. "I won't run," she murmured. This land is the last piece of Matthew I have left. The sheriff sighed. Some things ain't worth dying for. She didn't answer, but her silence had weight. Even the desert felt heavier. The sky turned bruised, storm clouds thickening like something was gathering. Not rain, but reckoning. The wind howled low across the plains, rattling shutters and stirring old memories. At the saloon, an old Civil War veteran named Creighton, half blind and half drunk, watched Evelyn from the window. Those eyes, he muttered. I've seen him before. On battlefields where angels don't go. Nobody believed him. Nobody wanted to. Still, people began noticing odd things. Evelyn could spot riders long before they reached town. She could lift sacks of grain heavier than she looked capable of. And once, only once, someone saw her hit a rattlesnake at 20 paces with a stone. The whispers turned uneasy. Maybe she ain't what she seems. Maybe she's hiding something, but the desert already knew. One evening, as the last red light bled across the plains, a Benedict rider approached her ranch again. This time he carried a knife and a smirk. He cut the rope of her windmill, letting it crash down with a deafening crack. Dust swallowed the air. Evelyn stepped forward, voice barely above a breath. Please don't. The man laughed and rode off, leaving the windmill broken and the trough dry. The storyteller's voice drops to a hush. And that was the moment, though no one knew it yet, when the desert remembered blood. Only this time, it wasn't hers. The storyteller's voice softens, as though afraid the desert night itself might lean in closer. Now here's where the tale shifts, he says, stirring the fire with a stick. Sparks leap, shadows dance. Because a person can hide sorrow, but they can't hide who they were born to be. Trouble came crawling back to the Hale ranch under the cloak of night. A Benedict torch flickered on the horizon, heading straight for Evelyn's barn. Moments later, flames licked the sky, bright, hungry, merciless. By the time she reached it, the fire was already chewing its way up the rafters. Smoke curled into the stars like dark fingers gripping the heavens. On the barn wall, glowing in orange firelight, was the crude brand of the Benedict family. She didn't scream. She didn't rage. She only stared, too calm, too quiet. In town, word spread like wildfire. Men gathered in the saloon, staring into their whiskey glasses as the night trembled with uneasy wind. That's when he saw her, the drifter. Old, scarred, one eye clouded white like a winter moon. His hand shook as he held his drink, but his breath caught when Evelyn walked past the window, silhouetted in firelight behind her. He whispered a name no one in Hollow Bend had heard before. Evelyn. Graves. Creighton, the half-blind veteran, jerked his head toward him. You know her? The drifter swallowed hard, eyes never leaving the woman in the distance. I served with her, he rasped. Back in the War on Terror, long before this place ever heard her voice. The saloon went dead quiet. He set his drink down with trembling fingers. She weren't just a soldier. She was the best scout in the Western campaign. Took out raiders in the dead of night, one by one, without ever being seen. Folks said she moved like a whisper and shot straighter than any man alive. A cold ripple passed through the room. But she vanished, he continued, after she lost someone she loved. Folks said she went looking for peace or death. No one knew. Outside, the barn collapsed in a rain of sparks. Evelyn walked out to the old oak tree behind her house, a place where Matthew once carved their initials. She knelt there, the fire's glow flickering behind her like a second sunrise. Her fingers dug into the dirt, and then she found it. The oilskin-wrapped bundle she'd buried the night she swore never to be who she once was. She unwrapped it slowly. A long, dark rifle gleamed in the firelight. Cold, precise, remembered. Her breath shook. I tried, she whispered to the empty night. I truly try to live quiet, Matthew. For you. She slid a bullet into the chamber with the ease of old muscle memory, a gesture too practiced to belong to a simple ranch wife. The storyteller looks up from the fire, eyes glinting. And that night, children, the widow, stopped hiding from her own name. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying the scent of rain and the tension of a town that hadn't slept in fear for days. The Benedicts gathered in their hideout, laughter thick with liquor and cruelty, thinking no one could touch them. Above them, a shadow moved along the rim of the canyon, silent, precise, untouchable. Evelyn Hale, or Graves, as some would later whisper, was watching. Lightning split the sky. One flash illuminated her silhouette. A woman in dust-stained clothing, rifle in hand, eyes like steel. Now, the storyteller mutters, voice dropping low. This is where the desert itself held its breath. A single gunshot rang out, sharp, impossible clean. A bottle shattered in Jed Benedict's hand, glass spraying like morning dew in the sun. Jed froze, jaw slack. "What in hell?" he whispered. "I said don't." Her voice rolled over the canyon like thunder, calm, steady, and carrying every ounce of warning the frontier had ever known. The Benedicts panicked. Bullets screamed through the night, kicking up dust and sending sparks from the rocks. They fired blindly, their laughter replaced by cries of confusion and fear. But Evelyn moved like a shadow among shadows. Lightning flashed. Her figure vanished and reappeared in perfect timing. She disarmed them one by one. Guns flew from hands, boots slipped in dust, men staggered into canyon walls. No blood was spilled. Not yet, but every man knew the desert itself had decided their reckoning. Jed tried to run. Evelyn stepped forward, rifle raised, calm as the stars. "Your father killed my husband," she said softly. "You thought I'd break." He swallowed hard, voice trembling. What are you?" Her eyes glinted in the lightning. "I'm the widow you should have feared." One more shot cracked across the canyon, hitting a rock mere inches from Jed's boot. Dust rose like smoke, wrapping him in warning. By sunrise, the Benedict gang was gone. Scattered, broken, humiliated. The town dared to peek out their windows, finally exhaling as the shadow above the canyon vanished with the wind. Back at the Hale Ranch, Evelyn knelt beside Matthew's grave once more, brushing dirt over her hands. The rifle lay in the corner, quiet now, its purpose fulfilled. The storyteller leans back in his chair, letting the embers glow. Some say she disappeared after that night. He whispers, voice low. Left Hollow Bend under a sunrise painted red like gunpowder. Others say she walks the frontier still, protecting the land she swore she'd never lose. He taps the fire with his stick, sparks rising like little ghosts once more. But every so often, he says, leaning closer, eyes twinkling, when the wind moans through the canyon and the dust dances across the plains, folks swear they hear her voice again, soft, yet deadly. He pauses, and with a hushed, chilling tone, he says, "Please don't.